Welcome to Steeped in Portland. I'm your host, Shaii Flores, and today I'm here with our subject matter expert in tea, Christopher Lum, founder of Gold Arhat Tea. Hi, Chris.
Hi, Shaii.
The viewers that don't know you yet, who was Christopher before tea and what brought you onto this path?
It's weird to imagine a Chinese person without tea. It's really common for Cantonese families and Chinese families to grow up eating dim sum. And so a part of that culture is you're eating food and you're sharing it over tea. And that's like its cultural origin. And so I grew up with my grandparents and my family drinking tea at the dinner table, but it's kind of synonymous with culture.
So in your journey, what was the moment where tea kind of shifted for you from a drink to a practice to your craft today?
Yeah, well, what happened was when I was really young, I had found my first Kung Fu master when I was 15. And we would train all day. And after we were done training, we would go to his place and drink tea together. And you'd teach me about Chinese culture, Taoism, Buddhism, and philosophy. And so that became this way of like understanding tea, that it's experience where you're getting to know somebody. And from there, after learning from my first master, I had dated somebody that had a lifelong practice of doing Gongfu cha, which is what I do. It means skilled tea. It's a folk practice that comes from Guangzhou in the south, where my family's from. And you get multiple successive steeps with these high quality teas with these really tiny teapots for tasting. Yeah.
How many steeps would you say we get out of one of these?
Well, with really high quality tea, such as this tea guanyin from Fujian, this is a low oxidized, rolled and processed tea. You can get anywhere from 10 steeps to 15 or 20 even. Yeah.
That's a lot of steeps.
Yeah. But the purpose is that the flavors, the scents will change over time. And so from the first steep, your experience is going to be dramatically different from the end steep. You might experience something very savory at the beginning and something a lot more sweet at the end.
What about in the middle? What might one expect, or is it different?
You know, it's only bad things happen in the middle. Would you like to smell the leaves? And that's just water. I'm going to warm up your cup here.
What tea are we drinking right now?
So this is the Fujianese low oxidation tea guanyin, which is bodhisattva of compassion. And this is like a really common oolong. And so, yeah, it's an oolong tea.
I like that. Compassion sounds like a much needed thing nowadays. Is this the first steep?
So what I'm doing now is I am brewing this tea really shortly and flashing it with some hot water in order for the leaves to become more saturated. And so this is like a traditional process. This is a Yixing clay pot, and it's an unglazed clay that I will pour one type of tea in. This is my oolong pot, and supposedly over time, not only do you pour tea on top and it creates the patina, but it flavors the teapot over time, like a cast iron.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Cast iron tea.
Careful, it's very hot if you'd like to smell the leaves. And so usually the first pour is going to be a lot weaker, and then it's going to start opening. What do you smell, Shaii? There's no wrong answers.
Strangely, kind of some umami. A little earthy.
See, that's good.
Warm, but still light, refreshing. Not as earthy as like a pour, for sure.
Look at that. You know a little bit about tea.
With a lot of your help. I like that. So tea, it sounds like, has been a real big connector for you. And it almost asks us to slow down, but Portland, especially right now, feels pretty chaotic. What have you noticed about how people show up when they sit at your table?
So the vehicle for doing Gongfu Cha is natural for me. I'm from Hawaii. There's this idea that when you go and eat with people, or you go and meet with people, that you're talking story. And so there's a little bit of spinning yarn, there's a little bit of storytelling that happens. And in Gongfu Cha, because you have the ability and leisure to sit and have 10 pours, usually multiple teas, the minimum for sitting with somebody in China is usually like 2 hours is the minimum. So you're really getting to know the tea, you're really getting to know people. The cultural aspect of it is this is a vehicle for getting to know somebody at an equal level. In business, when you have really important business deals, not only do you bring them really nice tea, but you get to know that person through the skill of their tea pouring. You get to know them by just sitting and chatting with them. So for me, this is very natural for both being Cantonese and from Hawaii, because people understand that the quality of getting to know somebody is important. That's an important currency to sit and pay attention.
You've been training in martial arts, qigong, meditation almost for 3 decades now. How does that show up in your tea practice?
So I started learning meditation from my first Kung Fu master. And, having a disciplined cultivation practice is the largest backbone for having a tea practice. Like being able to have the discipline and the inclination to work on yourself is really important. It's also spiritually cultivated. So when you're doing meditation, when you're doing cultivative practices, you're using it as a vehicle to reflect on yourself, to reflect on the actions that you have on others. And hopefully in that practice, it makes you more grounded in how you're receiving people and more compassionate in your life outside of doing those practices. When people show up at the tea table, it should be an oasis. Should be somewhere where people feel safe and feel at ease to be themselves. And it actually takes the container of the person that's doing the tea to be mindful of those things. So I think a cultivation practice is really important.
And which form of martial arts helps you cultivate or curate that container for people that come to enjoy your craft?
So I'm currently a teacher and lineage holder of historic Chinese Westgate Northern martial arts. And so I'm lineage to a family that practices Baguazheng, which is the 8 trigram palm. It's a internal Taoist martial arts, which is cultivative and combat focused. So I do traditional historic martial arts. I do it every day. I train 1 to 5 hours a day. And that's a part of cultivation, working on yourself every day.
I love that. You went to China not too long ago, I think in the last year or so. Can you share anything about that trip and what it's changed, if anything, or what it's helped reinforce for you?
I had the huge privilege of being able to become a part of a historic Chinese martial arts family that dates back to its inception in China. And it changed me in so much that I had loved my own culture for as much as I get to know it, and getting to be in China and experiencing the people, experiencing the food, the sights, and the other aspects of just being in a different place was really captivating and inspiring. And I love the people in Beijing. I love being in China. And that's the exciting thing of doing tea. You don't learn about tea in so much that, okay, tea is from China. It's such a huge country with so many different climates, cultures, and microclimates, over 50 different types of indigenous people that live there, besides just the people that are living in these different provinces. You can learn endlessly about the different nooks and crannies about Chinese culture.
Was there anything different in that experience when you were visiting and learning in that environment? What did your normal practice look like?
I wouldn't recommend it. I would call learning Kung Fu bad life choices, because learning historic Kung Fu is a lot of really hard physical work. It's like doing an ultra marathon every day. I don't think that everyone needs to do that. Our school that I teach at does it to absorb as much information about the culture while the masters are still alive. And so we're doing it to preserve a legacy. We're doing it mindfully in order to get as much as we can before these practitioners are gone. Some of which are so talented because they grew up with multiple generations of martial artists under the same roof, learning things that I couldn't possibly learn by just being a practitioner here in America. It's grueling, it's difficult. There's a lot of humility necessary for going into a different culture and doing something like this. What I would recommend to people is if you're going to do martial arts, don't cut corners, always work hard. Your foundations are what's important because you can learn stupid techniques all you want, but the largest takeaway that I got was the difference between an American practitioner and a Chinese master is like seeing a great white shark and an ant. Seeing masters in China that do Kung Fu are on a level of physicality that is pretty phenomenal.
What do you think tea can teach us nationally at a moment where trust and truth feel kind of fractured?
Nothing's out off limit at the tea table. And I say this very mindfully because I think that how volatile our political landscape is right now, it should be both an oasis and a place where people talk sincerely and earnestly with who and what they are. At my tea table, we don't shy away from political discourse. We don't shy away from difficult, important, personal challenges. It's important for us to grow, and it's important for us to be sincere with how we show up, because so much of our lives is about, having to be this face for work, or having to be this person, or selling this image of who we are to our friends. But being at a tea table, like, you are supposed to be yourself. So I want people to show up and not be afraid to speak their mind, but also understand that they're going to be challenged.
So would you say just having that acceptance almost, just being warm and open to challenges can be something that tea teaches us?
Oh, absolutely. And like more practically, as we mentioned earlier, it is about slowing down. So much of our culture is you got your espresso, your shot's ready in 30 seconds. Like you can have your Americano done in 30 seconds. And when people are in cafes, they're on their laptops, they're like checked out, or they're doing during their work. With Gongfu Cha, you have to be engaged. You should be off your phone. You should be there with somebody. And most people have lost that practice. The practice of human beings being there with their family and enjoying a meal together. That's something people are missing.
So to me, at least in what I've experienced of you, your work is this like rare blend of kind of elevated and grunge. Do you think any parts of tea culture have been mishandled here in the US?
I think that, number one, there's no monolith for who holds culture, because that can be like a really dangerous practice of gatekeeping, whether that comes from people here in the West or people in China. And so what we have to understand about tea culture, it's not a monolith, and it's made up of people. People have weird views, and they have mistaken views about everything. And so what I found is you kind of have to create an understanding that matches the values of the culture. And the misconception that I can tell you about is a lot of people in the West will mislabel Gongfu Cha, which is skilled tea, what I do, this folk practice, as a ceremony. There are tea ceremonies in China, such as Shaii, which is from Taiwan actually, and Jing Cha, which is for wedding ceremonies and Kung Fu ceremonies. But this is a folk practice meant to be shared amongst people. It's casual, there's a ritualistic effect. But I find that in the West, a lot of people, a lot of Americans want to make this into this pluralistic spiritual ceremony. And tea can be spiritual, but I find more often than not, they want to market it as something that it's not.
I think in a previous conversation, you had kind of highlighted how some teas kind of have higher values based on availability. How do you keep it accessible?
Yeah, I think that, as I mentioned, this sort of practice was invented by blacksmiths and working class people. So it has to be accessible. That being said, there's an artisanship that comes with the tea. Some teas can only be picked 1 week out of the year. Some teas can only be known for their quality because they have sustainable farming practices that require immense amounts of labor. And so the heart of the matter is like what makes tea high quality tea and what makes it low quality tea has more to do with the mindful practices of how a tea merchant or a roaster is processing the tea and the farming practices that require multiple generations of knowledge, making sure that they're not stripping the soil of its nutrients, making sure that they're switching to different parcels of land that have tea that's not being overpicked, and sometimes using wild tea to harvest. So a lot of this comes down to a different philosophy of monocropping and industrial farming versus traditional microbatch folk farming practices. Just to slow down for a second, do you want to take a smell? This is, in my gaiwan, this is Jinmudan, which is the gold peony, fully oxidized red tea. In the West, people say black tea, like Earl Grey, and in China, they say Hongcha, which is red tea. And this is a fully oxidized tea.
There's something I want to say, like, it reminds me of starch in the nose.
Do you smell caramel and sweet potato?
Yes, that's probably the sweet potato that I was smelling.
See, when I say it, then you get it. That's part of Inception. You're supposed to manipulate people.
Do you manipulate people at tea?
That's the purpose. No, part of tasting is to get the notes. It's not everything. But I love guiding people through tasting. So here we have our Song Dynasty style teapot. The first teapot, our gaiwan. So it's just a lidded bowl. This is from Yunnan, of the indigenous people, the Dai people, indigenous potters making this beautiful ware. They're the stewards of pu'er, post-fermented tea.
When you're selecting teas for events that you do, can you walk me kind of through the process of your selection?
Well, it's more about how I'm feeling that day. No, I'm messing with you. I think most people want to try things that excite their palate. More often than not, I'll do a combination of teas that are in different layers of oxidation. So low oxidation, medium oxidation, and high oxidation.
What are the differences as far as like what that gives the taster an experience both in body and on the palate?
Yeah, in really common terms, let's take something like wine. Like a light Chardonnay would be like on one end of the spectrum. Something that's more medium and in the middle of oxidation in tea would be something like a Pinot Noir. And then we'd have something like our port on the far end that's really syrupy, thick, and bold. So with doing tastings, it's always good to start lighter and go deeper. This is like a general rule of thumb that I follow. It's not always the case. There should be a little bit of chaos when you're doing things too. Like you have to roll with the punches. And, that's the fun thing about doing tastings, learning and being creative and keeping people excited, even if they have expectations or if they don't have like a lot of knowledge.
Would you say that chaos cultivates curiosity throughout your tastings?
Yeah, sure. And it's good to just mess with people. So that's what's necessary there.
Gotta stay curious, gotta stay chaotic. Well, that explains why that smelled so much different.
Yeah, it's very different, isn't it?
That is wildly different. What?
Might have packed that a little strong.
You often talk about real tea, both serious and irreverent. In a city like Portland, where we're constantly marketed, experiences, performative activism, all of those things, what defines realness to you?
Okay, that's super loaded. So if we're addressing Portland, Portland's a city that prizes itself on rebellion, and I think it prizes itself on resistance, and that's a great thing. We have a culture that is going against the current administration's paradigm, which I think is a necessary thing for our day and age. When it comes to something separate that you had mentioned, like Chinese tea, I'm going to leave you with a bit of advice that I was given to a friend of mine in the tea world, and his father is a master tea roaster in Taiwan. And he gave his son this really amazing advice that you should try everything. You don't get to know what's good and what's bad by just trying only what you think is good and making an opinion. You have to have somewhere to create a contrast. So try what's bad, try bubble tea, try Lipton, try all of these things. Try them in different ways and make your decision and make your assumptions based on your experience. And then you'll get to know what's really good. And so for me, what makes something good, like all the talk, all of the practices don't matter if the product doesn't show up. So if I have a tea that comes from a tea bag and it's good, that makes sense. If I have tea that comes from loose leaf that's meant to be done and poured for multiple successive steeps like I'm doing now, that will show up. So I think what's real about that is being curious and making your own conclusions is really important.
So you kind of have to sit with an experience to really get to the heart of it, or for it to be real, is what I'm hearing you say. What practice, Chris, or reminder do you hope people walk away with after sharing tea with you?
Well, I hope I'm not too much of a jerk. No, I'm joking. What they should walk away with is hopefully, hopefully they're happy. It should be a calming experience. It should be something where you're coming together and feeling connected and getting to know more about the tea varietals and techniques and practices that are necessary. And there's so much effort and intelligent craft and intentionality necessary for doing this sort of thing. And so I'm happy to share with people. I'm happy to learn with people. So yeah, I'm hoping to just meet people. I think that's what's important about doing this sort of thing is like meeting people where they are. Like if you have this preconceived notion that you have to have this flowery philosophical title about doing this sort of thing, then that becomes too tangled in on itself. So I think it's important to just meet people where they're at.
I love that. It's like luxury without the pretense, since it's this thing that we used to do all the time, connecting, spending hours at a time with each other and really getting to dive deep on all sorts of topics and really getting to know the person sitting across the way from you. On that note, is there anything you're dreaming of next for Gold Arhat Tea, or even for yourself in 2026?
Yeah, I'm going to continue doing my tea classes. I teach Gongfu cha. I'm going to be doing private pourings. I'm going to continue doing events where I do tastings. You and I had done one together with a baker friend of mine, Karina. We do like a 3-course tasting of various baked goods and fine quality teas. Hopefully traveling to do some workshops and teaching people about tea at both Hawaii and like maybe around the US. So things are always happening. I'm always planning on building things, and I'm also buying tea from China and selling it. So
Didn't you just get back from a trip to Italy?
I did. Yeah, thanks for remembering that, Shaii. Thank you for remembering that. Yes, I did just get back from Italy.
Was there any experience that you could pull from there that really stuck with you?
Yeah, we can start with that.
Yeah.
So I had met with a tea master in Italy, and there's a lot of weird ideas in America about what a tea master is, but this person was certified in Beijing under the Tea Masters program of Beijing, and she's also a tea evaluator that is certified in Yunnan in the west of China. She and I had tea. She has a tea school in Lucca in Tuscany. I had reached out to her, and we had this really wonderful session. Tea sommelier Italy, Letizia, really amazing person. I loved having tea with her. I also had traveled to Milan to have tea at Eastern Leaves. They have quite an excellent selection. I had visited Microcosma, which is a mycology symposium in the north of Italy that my friends throw, teaching all about taxonomy and workshops that working with fungi, fruiting bodies, and mycology. teaching about the history. We did foraging in a UNESCO World Heritage Site.
Oh, wow.
It's incredibly affordable. You get to meet all sorts of really cool and interesting people in the mushroom world. And I also just in general enjoyed being in Tuscany, which excellent wine, excellent food, excellent weather. Jumping in the Mediterranean doesn't hurt either.
I bet. Would you say the level of certifications that the tea master you met with are pretty challenging to acquire? Since did she have to go to Beijing to get those?
Yeah.
And for that hierarchy of knowledge, I suppose, where would you rank yourself?
I would say I'm a skilled lay person. You know, like that makes me an expert in some aspects of tea, but like I'm a student too. And that's important to know. Like all people that are on different levels of like this hierarchy are always learning, and that's important. You're never a master in China and stop learning. Like that's also true in Kung Fu. You are given a title, but I find that that's not a destination. And that's the biggest difference that I find in Chinese culture. You know, it's not the stopping point, okay, I finally made it. It's an entire lifelong pursuit.
Well, thank you, Chris, for chatting with us today. I think we could definitely learn a lot by weaving things that we've discussed. Is there anything that you would want to preserve if we just had this crazy overhaul of people moving in and changing this or that about Portland?
I think what a lot of people like about Portland is that this is a great place for craftiness and DIY. And so, you know, having a city where people seek as a refuge for people that want to do art, want to engage in counterculture, want to do things that are both creative and fulfilling, that's important. It's important to support your local artists. It's important to support your creators. And that's going to foster a lot of intellectual and creative diversity. And if we didn't have that, we could just live anywhere. We could live in the middle of nowhere. We should have a place that supports its artists.
Well, thanks for always keeping it real. I really do appreciate that you can kind of straddle both worlds, kind of live in the borderlands, because you can do things and serve people in really high places, elevate the practice to be outside of what it was originally intended, and still also practice as it was originally intended. And I think, at least the way I've experienced your craft, that's where the accessibility comes from in having that one-to-one real person, not just someone teaching me things. Although I love that aspect, I feel like there's like an exchange always.
Yeah, it's kind of like a really weird dude thing where like a lot of times in normal conversations or even at the tea table, I'm very mindful and thoughtful to not just be the guy talking at people because that's just bad manners.
Is there anything that we haven't chatted about that you might want to give a shout out to, your upcoming classes as far as when that starts?
Oh, yeah. You can message me on my Instagram, CKYLUM or CKYLUM@gmail.com for information about upcoming classes, tastings, workshops, and private pourings. I guess I'll also shout out the people that, you know, support and sustain me. Thank you, Shaii, for supporting and sustaining me. My AAPI community with Amy and the rest of the crew. Primarily what I do with my time is, you know, giving my services and attentions to Asian American Pacific Islander communities and doing community meetings to get people in a safe space and also showing that we are large contributors to tea culture. Tea people here in Portland, let me give a shout out to Fly Awake Tea House. We have Kevin, who's the owner, who has this really wonderful place. I work here on Tuesdays. I do events with him. But primarily, like Kevin is probably one of the most Portland people I know. He started in his backyard while he was raising his kid, and he did really well and made this really amazing tea house. It's here in North Portland. He's just a really amazing guy that loves tea. Also, shout out the Kung Fu school that I work at, Flying Tortoise Academy Northeast on 44th and Gleason, where we teach Northern historic martial arts.
you kind of signed up for something you didn't really know entirely what it was, but you said yes and went with it anyway.
Oh my God, you got me some Zabutons?
Well, this is from our sponsor at Urbanite, one of the main sponsors to the Electric G.G mixer, and wanted to gift these to you, especially with your new move, and to thank you for letting us pop into your space of work. And hopefully this
is so nice.
Cushions many of
really
your future pourings.
That's cool. This one kind of looks like Starry Night from Van Gogh.
So shout out to
that's
Urbanite, Chris for sponsoring with tea time, and Kevin and Flyawake for letting us use their space for today's interview. Well, thank you for joining us here on our first episode of Steeped in Portland, speaking with Christopher Lum. Until next time, if you'd like to be part of the community, please follow along or stay tuned and join us for the next episode on Steeped in Portland.
My butt is going to be so comfortable. I'm going to have one per cheek. It's going to be so nice. Are you kidding me? I'm not even going to have clothes on.